That's why no one wants me. I said, I do. The zipper came down slow, and what I saw made me forget how to breathe. Not because of what was revealed, but because of what it meant. Scars, deep, old, unforgiving scars, that ran across her back like a map of every place life had broken her. She stood there in my living room, tears sliding silently down her face, waiting for me to look away in disgust like everyone else always did. Instead, I said two words that changed both our lives forever. I do. If you believe that broken people deserve real love, not pity, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are real, and subscribe to this channel because we tell stories that stay with you long after they end. My name is Armaan, and 3 months before that night, my life looked nothing like the one I'm living now. I was 32 years old, working long hours as a delivery coordinator at a logistics company in the outskirts of the city, coming home every evening to an apartment that felt more like a storage unit for my loneliness than an actual home. My parents had passed within a year of each other when I was 26, and after that the concept of family became something I only watched happen to other people, through windows, through photographs, through the laughter of neighbors that drifted up through my thin apartment walls at night. I wasn't a bad man. I paid my rent on time, I helped strangers when I could, I said good morning to the old shaiwala on the corner every single day, but somewhere along the way, I had accepted a quiet, aching truth that I was simply not the kind of man people chose to stay with. Friends drifted away for reasons I never fully understood. A woman I loved for 2 years left without much explanation, only saying that she needed someone who felt lighter to be around. I didn't blame her. By then, even I found myself heavy to carry. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, and after my savings started thinning from an unexpected medical bill for my father's old debts I was still quietly paying off, I made the decision to list the second room for rent. I told myself it was purely financial. I didn't want company. I didn't want the complications of sharing my space with a stranger. But money doesn't care about your preferences, so I posted the listing anyway, expecting a college student or a tired office worker, someone who would come and go and leave me exactly as invisible as I'd become. Instead, I got a message from a woman named Zoya. Her texts were polite, brief, almost guarded. She asked about the rent, the neighborhood, whether the room had a lock on the inside. Something about the way she phrased that last question stayed with me longer than it should have. When we finally met for her to see the room, she arrived wearing a long-sleeved kurta despite the heavy summer heat, her eyes kind but distant, like someone who had learned to keep a certain wall up as a matter of survival rather than choice. She didn't smile much. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She simply looked around the room, nodded, and said it would do. I didn't ask why a grown woman with a stable-sounding job at a small tailoring shop needed to move into a stranger's apartment instead of living with family. It wasn't my business, and honestly, I understood the instinct to not explain yourself to people who hadn't earned that right yet. We agreed on the terms, and within a week, Zoya moved in with 2 suitcases and a small wooden box she carried like it held something far more valuable than clothes. The first few weeks were quiet in the particular way that 2 lonely people living under one roof can be quiet. We'd cross paths in the kitchen, exchange a few words about the electricity bill or whose turn it was to buy groceries, and retreat back into our separate silences. She left early for work and often came home late, her hands sometimes bearing small burns or needle pricks from the tailoring machines. I noticed she always wore long sleeves no matter the weather, and I noticed the way she flinched, just slightly, if anyone reached toward her too quickly. I noticed, but I never asked. I had learned that some doors are not meant to be pushed open by someone who hasn't been invited. Slowly, though, something in the apartment began to shift. It started small. She began leaving a second cup out when she made her evening chai, an unspoken invitation I accepted the first time almost out of surprise. Then came the evenings we'd sit on the narrow balcony saying very little, but somehow the silence started to feel less like emptiness and more like company. She had a dry sense of humor that would surface unexpectedly, catching me off guard into genuine laughter for the first time in what felt like years. I found myself looking forward to the sound of her keys in the door each evening, arranging my schedule so I'd be home when she returned, telling myself it was simply about being a decent roommate, One rainy evening in the second month, the power went out across our entire block. I lit 2 candles and found her sitting on the kitchen floor, knees pulled to her chest, breathing unevenly in the dark. I asked if she was all right, and for the first time since she'd moved in, she actually answered a personal question honestly. She told me she didn't like sudden darkness, that it reminded her of nights she didn't want to remember. I didn't push for details. I simply sat down across from her on that kitchen floor, placed a candle between us, and stayed until the lights came back on nearly 2 hours later. She didn't thank me in words, but the next morning, she left an extra paratha on my plate before leaving for work, and something about that small gesture felt heavier with meaning than any conversation could have carried. As the weeks turned into 2 months, I started noticing things I couldn't explain. Bruises that appeared and faded in irregular patterns, a phone that buzzed late at night, causing her whole body to tense before she silenced it without answering. A guardedness that never fully disappeared even as she softened toward me in every other way. I began to worry, the kind of worry that keeps you awake running through worst-case scenarios. But every time I tried to ask if she was safe, she'd deflect with practiced ease, changing the subject or offering a tired smile that asked me, without words, to let it go for now. It was on a Thursday evening, almost exactly 3 months after she'd moved in, that everything came undone. I came home earlier than usual to find our front door slightly open, and my heart dropped before I even stepped inside. I found Zoya in the living room, standing frozen, her phone shattered on the floor beside her, her whole body trembling. She told me, in broken pieces between gasping breaths, about a man from her past, someone she had once trusted completely, someone who had promised her a future, and instead left her with wounds that never fully healed, wounds she had spent years hiding from a world that she believed would only see her as damaged if they knew the truth. He had found her. He had come to the tailoring shop that afternoon, cornered her, reminded her of things she'd spent years trying to forget, and told her that no one decent would ever want her once they saw what he'd left behind on her body and in her mind. She said she needed me to know the truth before I found out some other way, because she was tired, so unbelievably tired, of people leaving once they discovered what she was carrying. And then, without waiting for my response, without giving me the chance to say a single word of comfort, she reached up and unzipped the back of her dress, letting it slip just enough to reveal what he had done to her. Scars along her back and shoulders, some faded with time, others still an angry red, physical proof of a story more painful than I could have imagined. She stood there exposed in every sense of the word, tears streaming freely now, waiting for the same rejection she had clearly faced before, already bracing herself to watch me walk away like everyone else apparently had. If this story is already touching something inside you, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment, because stories like Zoya's deserve to be heard by more people who still believe in choosing someone, scars and all. I didn't walk away. My feet felt rooted to that floor, but not out of horror, out of a fierce, sudden clarity I had never experienced before in my life. I stepped closer, slowly, giving her every chance to stop me if she needed to, and I gently helped pull her dress back over her shoulder, not to hide her, but simply to keep her warm while she cried. I told her that whoever convinced her those scars made her unlovable had been wrong, catastrophically wrong, and that surviving something so painful didn't make her broken, it made her one of the strongest people I had ever known. I told her that I didn't see damage when I looked at her. I saw a woman who had endured unimaginable pain and still made chai for a stranger, still laughed at bad jokes on a candlelit kitchen floor, still chose kindness even after the world had shown her its cruelest side. She looked at me like she didn't quite believe what she was hearing, like acceptance was a language she'd forgotten how to translate. So I said it again plainly without any performance or hesitation, because I meant every word with the entirety of my heart, that I wanted to be there, not despite her scars, but alongside her as she healed from them, for as long as she'd let me. And in that moment, without fully planning the words before they left my mouth, I told her that if she'd have me, I wanted to spend the rest of my life proving that not everyone leaves. I do, I said. I choose you. Today, tomorrow, and every difficult day after this one. The months that followed weren't a fairy tale, because real healing rarely looks like one. There were nights she woke up shaking from nightmares I couldn't fully understand, and I learned to simply sit beside her until the shaking stopped, without needing explanations. There were days she pulled away, testing whether my patience had a limit, And I made sure, every single time, to show her it didn't. Slowly, the walls she had built over years of survival began to soften, not because I demanded it, but because for the first time she felt safe enough to let them. We got married in a small ceremony 7 months later, just close friends and a handful of relatives. And when she wore a dress with a lower back that day, unafraid for the first time of what people might see, I watched her stand taller than I had ever seen her stand before. That man from her past never returned. And even if he had, Zoya was no longer the frightened woman standing alone in a dark living room. She had become someone who understood, deep in her bones, that her worth was never determined by her wounds, and that real love doesn't flinch at scars. It simply asks how it can help them heal. If Zoya's story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next story, and leave a comment letting us know your thoughts, because your support means everything to this channel and to stories like hers being told. And before you go, I genuinely love to know which country are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments below, because every single one of you from every corner of the world is part of what makes these stories worth telling. Thank you for staying until the very end.